Hello and welcome to a review and overview of our Introduction to Maya or Introduction to Modeling in Autodesk Maya course. I am your professor Christopher Dillard, and in this video we're going to recap what we've done in class so far. I will probably not be going very slow, but you are more than welcome to stop the video, rewind, repeat, whatever, until you get the hang of what I do. So far in class we've done a few things when it comes to modeling, and this will be pretty much duplicating what we've done in class so far. We're going to cover the basics of the Maya 2016 interface, navigating the scene, transform basics like move, rotate, and scale, the hotkeys for these, W, E, and R, as well as the selection tool, which is Q. Using simple primitives to create base forms like spheres, cylinders, cubes, etc. And using basic tools to shape these base forms into your desired structure. These basic tools include extruding, using edge loops to refine and define edges, or later you can use these to refine your animations if you do character animation. Using duplicate and duplicate special, and using bevels. Okay, so let's get started and duplicate what we did in class so far. Alright, here we have the Maya 2016 interface. I'm not very familiar yet with Maya 2016, but it doesn't really seem to be that different. It's just colors are different. Some of the things are moved. The modeling tab is a combination of the surfaces and polygon tab in previous editions. If you're using 2014, 13, 2015, or what have you, the menu set that we'll be using is called polygon. If you're using 2016 like I am here and like I have been using in class, you use the modeling selection. You can use the shelf if you so desire. I use both depending on what I'm doing. If you don't want to use these selections, you can go to your Create tab, Polygon Primitives, and you'll find them here as well. The difference is, whenever you click them here, it'll automatically create something for you, the sphere or whatever you select, and you'll have to change your inputs over here to make things different. Now if you want to do this on creation, go to your Create menu, Polygon Primitives, and select the Options. That's this little square. And you can change those selections before you actually even create the object. If you don't like where Maya will just create the geometry for you, you can go up to Create Polygon Primitives, and at the bottom where it says Interactive Creation, click this check, and now whenever you try to make any kind of geometry, it's interactive. Okay. Alright, so let's go about working with some of these different viewports and panels. Right now the first panel layout is the one I have selected, which is essentially one view. The second panel layout gives you the 4 view. And let me go ahead and make an object so you can see the difference. At the bottom here it says which camera or which view you're currently looking through. Here we have the top view. This is the front view, side view, perspective view. You can easily resize any of these if you prefer one view over the others. Remember that you can always focus on the objects you have selected in any view just by hovering over it and pressing the F key. Okay. If you want to reset, you can do it manually, or just click the View button again, or the Layout button. The third selection we have one view and the outliner window over here to the left. Conversely, you can select the one view and just go to Windows and select Outliner if you so desire. Same thing here, except at the bottom here we have the animation graph. Okay, so you get the gist of these. If you want to create your own, you can do that as well. Okay? Anyway, if you're working in views and you want to change one of these views, that's simple enough to do by using your hotbox selections. That's holding the space. And here you can see all your different selections and you say, okay, well, what are these? They're the same menu options that are at the top. Mesh, Edit Mesh, Mesh Tools, Mesh, Edit Mesh, Mesh Tools. It's just quicker if you hold down the space. Okay? The Maya, if you click on this with your left mouse button and hold it down, you can easily select any of these viewports. Say I want to look at my left view, or I want to look at the right view, or I want to look at my perspective view. Now if you have multiple windows open, whichever view you're hovering over is the one that you change. Keep in mind that if you change both of them to a perspective view, they will match because it's the same camera. Even though your main cameras, perspective, top, front, back, left, and right, are hidden from view. If you want to make your own custom cameras, you can do that, and we will review how to do that in class at a later date. For right now, we just need one perspective view. Okay, let's go about recreating what we did in class, which was a simple solar panel in triplicate. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a polygon cylinder. First drag is the diameter. Next is the height. We're going to change our subdivisions in our axis to 6. Height and radius. Height I will change to make it look like a plate. Radius really doesn't matter. Not really worried about scale. Alright, so there we have the beginnings of our solar panel. But again, on the outside of this, I would like to make a small ridge to make the center look like it is inset. Okay, so we're going to add one subdivision cap. And it says the cap of the cylinder, the top and the bottom of the cylinder. If you look on the bottom, we also have another subdivision there. Okay. Now, remember that when you right-click over an object, you can go into sub-object mode. No, component mode, that's what it's called. Where you're selecting the different components of this geometry. For polygons, you have vertices, lines or edges, and polygons or faces. We're going to choose, and you can also do multi-mode where you can select anything. So if you want to select an edge here and a face here, you can do that by choosing multi. Okay? We just need to select edges though. We're going to select this inside edge. If you have a ring, you can just double click the one line and it will select the ring. Using our hotkeys, W for move, E for rotate, and R for scale, we can choose which transform we want to apply to this. Our gizmo settings, and this is the same for all of this, well, except for rotate. You can select the green to go up in the Y. You can select the blue to move in the X, and red to move in the Z. I think that's the right ones. Alright. Yeah, the red is Z, the blue, blue is Z, red is X. Alright, these boxes in the corners are so you can only move in these two axes. See? The one in the center is if you want to move in all axes. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to scale this out to make a little bit of a ridge on the outside. So, R key, change my scale. Okay, to make the ridge, we'll right click, choose face, and the same thing applies as when we were using edges. If you double click the edge, you'll select a ring. Same thing for faces, except you have to hold down shift and double click the second one. So we select one, and then the next face in this series of ring, for this ring, double click it, hold down shift and double click it, then you'll select that ring. Okay? The reason being is, let's say I select this face, and maybe I don't actually want to select this ring going around. Maybe I want to select this loop on the other side. So it doesn't know if you want the ring or the loop. So if you double click it by itself, well, it doesn't really know which way you want to go. So I can hold down shift and double click this and get this loop. So that's why you have to hold down shift and double click the second polygon in whichever selection group you want. Alright, so what we're going to do with this is we're going to apply an extrude. Okay? So we have a couple ways we could do this. Here's your extrude on the shelf, but again, no options. You can't change any options on here before creation. If that's okay with you, where you just click extrude and make your changes however you want, that's fine. You can go over here and change however you want your extrude to be. Okay? But if you would rather change your options, and again, this is new as well, you can change your thickness here on this. I don't even know what the proper name for this thing is because I didn't have this before. You can change your offset, and the offset is the thickness from the end face or polygon in comparison to the one you started in. Okay, so you can make it thinner or even thicker, whatever. Personally, I usually prefer to set these options before I even make my geometry. So I like to go up to Edit Mesh, Extrude, and select the options. Now I don't always do this for the sake of speed. If I'm just trying to outline something quickly or prototype a design, I don't even bother with this. I just throw something together and come back and work on it as need be. But that might not be the best workflow for you. This is something to decide for yourself. I'll change my thickness, hit apply, and as you can see, it's way too thick, but it's easy to come in here and make it however you want it. Okay? And that's good. That's good enough. Alright, so we have a very basic design. Actually, you know what? I want to make that a little bit thicker. Okay. So now what we want to do is make those vents going across. Well, you know, vents or whatever you want to call them. Just adds a little bit of visual interest, shall we say. Okay, to do that, we're going to go and create a simple cylinder, like so. Use our rotate tool and begin to rotate it. Now we don't need to eyeball this, because over here we have our selection and we have all of its transforms here. Now you can change these manually, or you can select what you want to change and then middle click, so click your mouse wheel down and move it side to side. Or if you want to be exact, you can type in what you want. We want it to be 90 degrees. Slide this into position, like so. Alright, you can change the diameter to match the look that you're looking for. Okay. No, do not need you. Alright, so what we want to do now is we want to duplicate this across. So we want this to repeat. Now to do this, what we want to do is actually see how far each one is going to be from the one before that, before we duplicate it. Now to do that, we'll duplicate it one time. Okay? So we go to Edit, Duplicate. Well, didn't have it selected, I guess. Okay? Make sure you have the object selected, Edit, Duplicate. Now, it looks like nothing happened, but what has actually happened is you've created a duplicate in the same exact position at the same exact rotation with the same exact scale as the one that it was duplicated from. So if you just move it to the side or rotate it or make any adjustment at all, you'll see that it changes, or that it's no longer on top of the other one. So we can move this over and judge the distance that we want to use. Okay, now the thing to do before we do this is, as you can see, I'll just move it back to where it was. Our translate, so our positioning of all of these numbers are kind of hard to determine. I mean, you can obviously, you can pull out a calculator and do this, but if you start to move this, okay, well, what's the difference between negative 2.717 and negative 3.756? Well, yeah, let's sit there and waste time. Or before we do this, we can do something called freeze transforms. And what this will do is take all of these translates and set them to 0. So it will essentially make the position that this object is currently in its home position. Now, it's useful for measurements like this, obviously, because that's what we're going to use it for. But it's also useful for another reason. If you're prototyping and you want to just see what something will look like at another location, you can do that, okay? Move it to wherever you want. Say we want to move this over here. And then I decide, you know what, I don't really like this. But maybe you made some other operations when you moved it. So let's say, for example, I also made another cylinder, and I moved that into position that I wanted. And I made some modifications to that. But then I say, okay, no, I don't like this position. Well, if I hit undo a couple times, it also undoes all of this other work that I did. And we don't want that. So what you can do is you can take this, since we actually zeroed out the position for this, the transformations, we can go up to modify and reset transformations, and it will take it right back to 0. See? So that's one useful thing. Another useful thing with doing your reset transforms, or sorry, your freeze transforms. Alright, we don't need this garbage. So now with these transforms reset, set to 0, now I can go to Edit, Duplicate, and now when I move it, I can see the exact distance that these two objects are apart. Alright, we can just set it to be 1, nice round number. Okay, looks okay. Delete that. Now, instead of duplicating, we're going to say duplicate special. And when this dialog box pops up, we can change some settings, which is what we're going to do. We're going to, each new object that we make, or each duplicate, we're going to move it one in the Z direction. And how many copies do we want to make? I don't know, let's say 10. Apply, and now we've made 10 duplicates, and each one gets moved over 1 unit in the Z axis. Now we don't need this one, or this one. Delete those. And it's not quite uniform here as well. So what we can do is we can select all of these, change the scale a little bit, and move it over. Just kind of eyeball it for now. It's not really that important. Not for this project. To make it look more uniform, at least more uniform than it actually is. Okay, now with that done, we want to go in here and change the scale of these so they'll fit inside of the other geometry and don't look like they stick out like that. You want to be careful that you don't go in too far, obviously. Now if you have this trouble where just a little bit of it sticks out, you can always go into Vertex Mode. Hit your 4 key so you can see through objects just by using wireframe. It's not letting me select what I want to select. Alright, and now I can grab these couple of vertices that are sticking out, use my move tool and push those in. Same thing on the other side. Now, to do this is the 4 key to do wireframe display. If you hit the 5 key, you'll go back to shaded mode. Alright, I'm only going to do that for the 1. I'm not going to really worry about if a little bit of it is not showing through. I'm not worried about perfection, I'm worried about demonstration. Alright, so I'll scale this in. Close enough. Repeat with this one. Just so you know, one of the operations that's performed in Maya is selection. So if you click on something accidentally and unselect what you had selected previously, you can just use Control Z to undo, and you'll go back to your previous selection. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but if I press 4, and let's say that I'm working on this cylinder, and I have only these few vertices selected, and then I accidentally click off, I have to go back and select all those vertices. But if I just hit Control Z, I'll go back to that selection of vertices. So it's actually quite useful. Alright, so whenever you make these objects, if it turns out that your gizmo, and that is the actual term, is appearing offset from your object, which sometimes is useful, but sometimes it's not. What you can do, let me adjust this one too while I'm here. That's fine, good enough. Alright, what you can do, let's see if I can find it. Go to Modify, I was right the first time. Go to Modify and Center Pivot, and that will take your pivot point, which is where you move this object from, and you can snap it to the center of the object. So no more messing around with the gizmo that's not actually anywhere near your object. Now, that being said, if you want to move the pivot point on its own, you hold down the D key, and then you can move your pivot point wherever you want, which is very useful if you want to rotate an object not around its, its center point or anything, but around some other point, which we will be doing later. Alright, so there we have our initial solar panel. Now, I really don't like this thickness, so I'm going to select all of those, move them down some. There, that's okay. That's a little bit too much. There we go. Alright, so here's our initial solar panel. What we're going to do with this one now is we're going to group it so that we can manipulate this entire set of geometry at once. Okay, so we're going to select everything inside of here. Well, maybe we won't. Oh, okay, I see. My bad. Alright, so make sure you have Object Selection Mode on. Select everything. Hit Control G as in group. Control G. And that will group everything. So now I can easily select this if I go to where I can actually select the group. Well, where is that? Remember this selection that we made earlier opens up one panel and the outliner. So that's what we're going to select, this panel layout. Or, again, conversely, you can stick to the one that you have and go up to Windows, Outliner. Inside of this, you'll see the names of all of our objects and groups. So I can drop the cascade on this group and see all of my individual objects. Now, you should name these as you go, but for these little pieces, I'm not that concerned with it. The group, I am. So I'm going to name this Solar Cell. And to change the name, all you do is double-click the title. Okay? So, what I'm going to do with this solar cell is I'm going to duplicate it. Let's see, I guess in the Z direction. So, don't need the outliner right now. So I'll go to Edit, Duplicate, and I'll move my duplicate so that it is matched up and barely touching the other object, the other solar cell. Alright, so with that in place, I see that if I want to duplicate a row of these, there'll be 8.511 units in the Z-axis apart. Okay, so now I can go back to my outliner. My duplicate I can delete. I can select, this is from stuff that's coming up later. I can select the solar cell, duplicate special, and in the Z axis I'm going to move each one 8.511, and let's make 8 copies. No, 7 copies, because I want 8 total. Alright, so I've made my row. I want to take all of these solar cells, select them all, Control G again to make another group, and I'll say cell row. So I've made a group of this row of solar cells. I'll make a duplicate of that and manually move it into position. Now you can see that we're offset by 1. So what I'll do, if you select something in a scene and it's inside of a group, you'll see that in your outliner that group is selected, and when you cascade it down, you'll see that it's actually selected which solar cell this belongs to. So now I can just select that solar cell, duplicate, and move this over into position. I can go and do it the exact amount, but this is fine. Alright, so I have 2 rows of solar cells. Now, since the next row will be this first row, and it will fit neatly into the second row, I can now duplicate this using duplicate special. If I would have done it before, these cells would have been well, messed up. You can do the math on that, I'm sure. Okay, so we're going to select these 2 rows, group those, and I'll call this cell row units. Alright, so we're going to make 4 more? Yeah, that seems okay. 4 more of these cell row units to make the panel. Alright, so with cell row unit selected, we'll go to Duplicate Special. We're going to make 5 more. Actually, no, I can't do that yet. I didn't actually see how far. Alright, so we'll just duplicate one time, move it into position. Looks like 14.731. Just kind of eyeball it to make sure. That looks okay. Alright, now I can delete that duplicate. Now edit, Duplicate Special. Make 5 copies. In the Z direction, 14.751 units. And I've made my panel. Or at least the cells that will comprise my panel. So I want to take all of these rows, group them together, and I'll call this solar cell panel set. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Now when moving this around, you can see that the pivot of this group is the bottom left-hand corner, well, the bottom left-hand center of the bottom left-hand solar cell. Now, perhaps you want it like this for some reason. Whenever you want to rotate it, you want to rotate it around that singular cell. But I would like to use this in a different fashion. And I'll wait a second before I actually move this. What I want to do first is I'm going to create a cube to fit underneath all of these solar cells, so that these cells kind of sit inside of this rectangular back panel, I guess would be the name. Alright, so what we're going to do is we'll create a simple rectangle like so, and move it into position. Okay. Want this to match up very, very closely with the edges of these polygons, and in the X direction as well. Alright, it's okay. Now what I would like to do is make sure that this is centered exactly. Now the easiest way to do that is to use something called snapping. So what we're actually going to do is we're going to take the center of this object and snap it to the origin of the scene. And once we do that, we can take the center of this group of cells and snap that to the center of the origin of the scene. Now the problem that I said earlier, I'll change the name of this to panel back. That's the rectangle. So the problem that I said earlier was the pivot point of the solar panels is in the bottom left-hand corner. So if I actually would try to move this and snap it to the center, up here are the snapping tools, by the way. So let's say the first one, snap to grid. So what this will do will snap to any point on the grid. So now I can snap this to the center of the universe as far as these objects are concerned, and you'll see that it's not centered. And the reason is because its pivot point is in the bottom left-hand corner. So to remedy this situation, we go up to Modify, Center Pivot. So now we have the pivot centered in the middle of the object. Now, when we move it to the center, it is exactly in the middle of the scene. Do the same thing with the back face. And we'll move it up a little bit initially so I can see. Oh, this other thing's in the way. Move that. All right. Now, you'll see that it's actually making these little jumps. Well, the reason it's doing that is because I'm still snapping to a grid. So I want to turn my snapping off so I can use different increments. Okay. Now, both of these objects are right on top of each other. But the back panel doesn't seem very interesting visually. So what we would like to do is add some visual interest here. And to do that, we're going to bevel these edges, the corners. Now, this one, because it has this gaping hole here, I don't really want to mess with that one. But this one has a nice angle that we can match. Same here. Over here, it's the same as this one. I mean, we could do something with it, but I'd rather not. Maybe. No, because they won't be even. Okay, I'll just do all of them just for practice. Alright, so we're going to select this and we're going to use our bevel tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we have edge selection on. Select this edge. Now this edge and the topology of all of the objects involved matches and is mirrored by this edge. So we'll select those two. And let me close my outliner. And we'll go up to Edit Mesh, Bevel. Now you'll see the bevel amount is pretty drastic. But do I want to add an offset? You know what? I'm going to redo it using the options. So I want to go to Edit Mesh, Bevel Options. Alright, my width, I'll make it pretty small here. You can see the bevel is not quite so drastic. And this little pop-up, this new thing, we can use that as well. You'll see that, you know, it is pretty drastic. So we'll go and change the amount this way. But what I would actually like it to do is I would like this angle to match the angle presented by the solar cell. And as you can plainly see, it does not. On the other side, same thing. So the way I'll actually get it to match is I'll switch to Vertex Mode. Select these two vertices. Use my Move tool and move those over. And, you know, I'll just eyeball it. I'm not really that concerned with exactness. I think that's a word. Same thing on the other side. I guess you would say precision. Not sure. Okay. Same thing on this side. I'll select my edge. Hold down Shift, select my other edge. Edit Mesh, Bevel. Change the fraction, the offset amount. Maybe something like that. I don't know if I like that or not. Well, I'll select vertex, select this group of vertices, Shift and marquee select this group. Use my move tool so I make sure I move them both the same amount. Move it something like that. Doesn't look great, but that's fine. Right click, choose face, and we're going to add some more visual detail or some more visual interest to this. We're going to select this face and Shift, double click the next face in this ring. We're going to add an extrude for the sole purpose really of adding a ridge for a little bit of visual detail. So now we'll select this face, double click this face to select all the way around. Do another extrude and reduce that thickness down. Okay. Now do another extrude. I want my thickness here to be 0. I want it to stay on the face that it's currently on. And I actually just want to change the size. Actually, yeah, that's not going to work. I'd have to do it locally. So instead we'll go to Edit Mesh, Extrude Options. And we're going to change our okay, this video is getting a little long. That's what I thought. Okay, you know what? Never mind. We're going to leave it the way it was before, just with the one extrude. What I was trying to do was do another extrusion on top and then just kind of put a little bit of an indentation inside of it. But I'm not going to worry about that. What I will do is do it on either side. Alright, so for example, I'll grab this one and I'll do a extrude. Again, I'll set my thickness to 0. Change my scale a little bit in all directions. Okay, so I'll just make a slight little indentation there. Then I'll do another extrude. and go in the negative direction. And it kind of makes a little indentation. Let's see. Do the same thing on the other side. Extrude options. Thickness will be 0. Offset. Maybe something like that. Close, kind of close. Okay, do another extrusion. I'll get this timer out of the way. Okay, another edit mesh extrusion options. This time the offset will be 0. Extrude, and now I can just push this down ever so slightly just to add some visual interest to this. Alright, so that concludes the unit of replicating what we did in class. I hope this helped with any doubts that you had for what we performed in class. We also replicated this 3 times, but I'll include that on the continuing lesson for the lab. The file you will start from for the lab will be this file. Okay? See you for the lab video. Have a nice night or day.